Increasingly, we hear that innovators and companies need to think about reimbursement as well as regulation as they design their initial trial strategy. That brings us to another branch of the government, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS. Can you tell us how CMS and FDA relate and what an innovator or company needs to think about between those agencies?
Well, there are really two hurdles that companies need to cross in order to be able to market their product successfully in the United States. One is obviously getting the product through FDA and onto the market. But just as important, and maybe in some cases more important, is figuring out how the product is going to be paid for while once it's on the market, rather. The two agencies, CMS and FDA, are not formally linked, and in fact, FDA is not permitted to consider cost in deciding whether or not to clear or approve a product. But nonetheless, the two agencies are intertwined in some respects because FDA approves and then CMS decides whether or not to pay for the product. So the things that FDA looks at and CMS looks at in making those determinations are not always the same. And it's very important to consider what each agency's requirements are in order to make sure that you have a chance of success with both of them. In order to do that, I strongly recommend that people who are dealing with the FDA think early not only about what the FDA requirements are, but also what the CMS requirements may be, so that they can take advantage of the data that they collect for FDA, for example, to use it to support the submission that they may make to CMS in order to get that agency to agree that the product deserves to be reimbursed. And there are a couple of examples that I could use that are historical, but I think they illustrate the point well. Hearing devices can be put on the market through a variety of mechanisms with the FDA. If you're classified as a hearing aid, you can get through the FDA pretty quickly under a 510K, but CMS doesn't pay for hearing aids. If you're a hearing implant, it's going to take a longer period of time. It probably will require a PMA, but CMS does reimburse for that. And there are products that fall in between those two clear categories, and companies need to think strategically about whether they want to be a hearing aid, assuming they have the opportunity to fall into that category, and get on the market quickly, or whether they would rather go through the longer PMA process so that they can be reimbursed once the product is approved.